Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Life, the Universe, and Bowling. My name is Tom Seiler, and here we go with another episode. This one is kind of near and dear to my heart because there's a lot of discussion going on online about it. We're just going to title this one Urethane. So there's a new boogeyman in bowling, and it goes by the name of urethane. Some common misconceptions have been spread about urethane, and a few of them basically boil down to urethane messes up the lane condition, it stretches the pattern, it creates carry down. People who use urethane on house shots should be tarred, feathered, murdered, etc. So let's break those down and try to make some sense of it. Other urethane topics like urethane's only good for high rev players or short patterns, or urethane doesn't hook as much as reactive balls, we'll cover those at another time in a later podcast. But first of all, let's talk about the claim that urethane is messing up the lane condition. Is that true? Let's clarify first what messing up the lane condition really means. Most bowlers who complain about urethane complain that they carry down oil to the back ends where the ball's supposed to hook freely. That's true. However, it's also true of plastic and reactive balls. Why does urethane get singled out? Why do they get the bad reputation? Lots of people, I would dare say most, probably if I had to throw a percentage at it, I would say 95% of the bowlers that I know do not understand how carry down happens. So that's really primarily what we're going to talk about here. When a ball rolls down the lane, it does a few things. Most notably, those things are it picks up oil from the front of the lane on its cover. It redeposits that oil on the back end of the lane where it rolls or flares across previous track lines, the lines that's picked up oil on the ball from the front part of the lane. So it picks up oil from the front, redeposits it on the back, and it begins to absorb oil into the cover if it's composed of reactive resin. Plastic and urethane balls don't absorb oil as measurably as reactive balls or at all. The ball continues to absorb that oil as it goes through the pins, it returns in the subway, comes back up the ball return, and it's waiting for you to throw it again, right? Why do I mention this? Because a lot of people list slow or no oil absorption as a reason that plastic and urethane balls carry oil down the lane faster. In reality, the ball is on the lane for about 2.5 seconds for an average bowler, 17 miles an hour. 2.5 seconds is not a lot of time. When you consider that it's in the pattern picking up oil for 2/3 of that, let's say a 40-foot condition. So it's only in the dry part of the lane for about 2/3 of a second, maybe a full second if you throw it a little slower. USBC governs oil absorption as anything less than 135 seconds being illegal. So they put a couple drops of oil, 3 to be particular, on the surface of a bowling ball, and they start a clock. And if that oil is still there after 2 minutes and 15 seconds, 135 seconds, then more testing has to go in, because essentially that means the ball is either urethane or plastic, and there's some differences in hardness variables, et cetera, for the PBA and how they're certified, et cetera. So anyway, oil absorption is measured in minutes, not the 2.5 seconds the ball goes down the lane. All right. Why does that keep coming up? Because urethane haters keep mentioning it. People always say, well, this ball absorbs more than that ball, and this ball is going to hook more than that ball because it absorbs more. When the USBC did their study on ball motion, I believe oil absorption was either 5th or 6th out of all of the variables that were measured. And the reason that it was 5th or 6th was not because of how fast the oil went into the cover. It was because of the ball not being cleaned from one shot to the next. More on that later. Faster absorption increases the likelihood of your next shot having clean oil-free ball surface to roll on, right? Even if you don't towel it. Oil absorption rate doesn't affect carry down at all, not measurably. Even the fastest absorbing covers carry oil down the lane just as much as plastic and urethane do. if all other factors are the same. If you towel or chamois the ball in between shots, that reduces the argument and carry down even more. So are all the other factors the same? The answer to that is, like everything else in bowling, sometimes. Track flare seems to be the magic component. Let me explain why. When a bowling ball flares, a byproduct of that flare is that fresh bit of cover contacts the lane every time the ball rotates. Mostly. The contact patch for a bowling ball with the lane surface is about 1/8 of an inch wide, 3 millimeters. It's actually 3.1 something for a 74 hardness ball, which is minimum hardness. Harder balls, narrower contact patch. Okay. When a ring of oil from the previous rotation is clinging to the ball cover because it got picked up in the front, and the core causes a little bit of flare, the fresh oil-free cover is contacting the lane most of the time. The exception to that being when the new track crosses the existing oil lines at the bow tie. That'll create a little check down lane of redeposited oil in the back ends where you expect the ball to hook. And this is what creates carry down. These checks are where the track from one rotation intersects the track from another rotation, the ball at a shallow angle. Think of a 3 millimeter wide, small diamond, about 8 to 10 millimeters long, depending on the flare rate. I've got one here. You can see that. That's actually about twice the size of a normal check mark down lane. Per rotation, you'd see about that much oil redeposited from the cover, regardless of whether it's urethane or plastic or what it is. If the ball flares, that's what you're going to see down lane. Oil doesn't get pushed down lane, but rather picked up and redeposited, placed back down, kind of like a rubber stamp. The more the ball flares, the smaller the check mark, because it hits the crossing tracks of fresh versus not fresh at a larger angle. So the check mark's actually smaller. When it's at a shallower angle for balls that flare less, those check marks are a little bigger. Balls that don't flare at all, or less than about 1.5 inches, produce very thin streaks. Think of the same diamond-shaped check mark, only they're very, very elongated because one rotation of the ball doesn't completely clear that 3 millimeter wide streak that it picked up from the previous rotation. And then you can start redepositing streaks down lane. So more track flare, less redepositive oil on the back end of the lane. Less track flare, more redepositive oil. This lack of flare is what causes carry down. Because historically, urethane balls have had very, very weak cores, right? That don't flare much. Urethane gets the blame for stretching patterns, creating carry down, pushing oil, however your terminology is. Urethane gets the blame because historically those balls flared very, very little. We also didn't understand as well how to drill them back then. So our layouts on them back then created less flare. The reality is that anytime a bowling ball that doesn't flare much goes down the lane, it'll stretch the pattern very quickly because of the volume of oil used today. That's another difference between now and when urethane used to be common. A purple hammer drilled 4 inches pin to PAP, for me, flares about 1.25 inches, just like the one sitting behind me. That's the one that I use for testing, on a 40-foot pattern. So obviously it's going to flare a little bit more if the pattern's longer, a little bit less if the pattern's shorter, but on a 40-foot pattern, it flares about 1.25 inches. A hustle, or another 030 diff low-end performance ball, drilled with a 5-inch pin to PAP, for me, flares almost exactly the same, about 1.25 inches. So these balls are going to redeposit oil down lane, carry down, stretch, again, whatever your terminology choice is, at exactly the same rate, even though one's urethane and one's reactive. So it doesn't matter what the cover composition is. What matters is the flare. Non-flaring bowling balls move oil, redeposit oil from the front to the back of the lane faster than flaring bowling balls do. One last thing. If you towel your ball between each and every shot, you will erase the previous track lines from the cover and you'll have a more consistent reaction. even if you have a very slow absorbing ball, if you towel it, you're going to remove the vast majority of the oil from the cover, and only a very tiny little bit has to absorb to leave you with a perfectly clean cover for your next shot. So toweling or chamoising your ball greatly reduces the amount of carry down that we see. So if you want to not get blamed for destroying everyone else's perfectly manicured path to the pocket, use a ball with at least 2 inches or more flare. Don't care what it is, urethane or whatever. And towel or chamois it every single time you throw it. That removes the maximum oil from the outside. 2 or 3 inches of flare means that your check marks, these little guys, are very, very tiny down lane, as small as they can be. You can throw urethane or reactive or whatever, fast or slow absorption, it doesn't matter. People still blame you, but that's because they're ignorant. If you want to stretch the pattern intentionally to create hold, use a lower flare bowling ball, so something that flares 1.5 inches or less. Keep your break point tighter and set up the lane. So maybe play in around 12, 13, 14, keep your break point as much in front of you as you can, square up, and that will create hold in the middle of the lane. Consider not toweling the ball between shots, and also consider using urethane or plastic so that oil doesn't absorb into the cover in between shots, so that you can move more oil down lane faster. So again, toweling or chamoising removes oil, so you get less carry down. Using more track flare removes oil, makes the checks smaller, so you get less carry down. Now, if you want to intentionally wreck the lanes for the people coming after you in a sweeper, then use a low flare bowling ball. Move your break point as far out on the lane as you can. Slow hook it. Don't towel the ball between shots. And be sure to keep your laydown in the pattern, in the puddle, so that you pick up fresh oil every shot. Those are pretty much your 3 options. Notice we're not talking a lot about whether you throw reactive or urethane. We're talking mostly about whether you towel your ball, whether you don't, how much flare you're using, and where you throw it on the lane. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully this can dispel some myths and misinformation that flies around the internet every day, even from knowledgeable sources. I'm not picking on those people. The word ignorant that I used earlier doesn't mean that someone is stupid. It just means that they don't fully understand the topic about which they're speaking. So intentional or unintentional lane modification, there you have it. It's not urethane, it's all about flare. Have a good day.